Hello everybody and welcome, or welcome back if you're one of my sexy subscribers. Arkansas, the 29th state of these United States. Also the state whose pronunciation is most likely to confuse anyone not familiar with the English language, as well as anyone familiar with the English language. You could tell it was definitely named by someone who knew how to read. Its state bird is the mockingbird, its state flower is the apple blossom, and the state beverage is milk. Don't know what you're going to do with that information, but you have it now. Here's its state flag, just skirting the line of what might be considered Confederate. Good job weaseling your way out of that one, Arkansas. Some famous Arkansans throughout history are Mike Huckabee. Anyone better? Ooh. We'll just enjoy that win until the Epstein list becomes public, which it assuredly never will. Anyone else over here? Oh, Johnny Cash! Okay, alright, you get this one, Arkansas. One of the greatest and most influential performers of all time. Alright, good win. I plan on making a little video on Johnny Cash sometime in the future, so if you don't want to miss that, subscribe, please and thank you. Alright, any more? Ooh, the kid from Hot Tub Time Machine. Clark Duke? Okay, well, Johnny Cash was a tough act to follow. Did you dirty there, Clark. I'm sorry it happened like that. Known as the natural state, naturally they wish to boast their splendors of nature. I'm gonna be honest, after doing the Alaska video, I don't really understand how any other state could possibly say they have claim to nature. But, alright, I mean, Alaska came late in the game in America, right? So, let's see what they got to offer. Alright, let's see here. We got TripAdvisor's 10 best Arkansas nature and wildlife areas with photos. Alright, let's see them. Cool, we got things here. We got Arkansas Grand Canyon. Alright, now we saw the Grand Canyon in the Arizona video. Link right here. Pretty spectacular. Literally one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. And let's see what you bring to the table, Arkansas. Yeah. Theirs. Yours. Theirs. Yours. It's pretty bold, Arkansas, not gonna lie. Anything else that's cool about your state? Oh my! Arkansas is home to the legendary city of El Dorado. If only Conquistador Francisco Vasquez de Coronado had known. He only needed to pop a little southeast, my gosh. What wonders do you hold for us, mystical city? Right here on the official Arkansas website. El Dorado. Right. Alright, oh yeah, you wanted a city of gold? Here's a hipster on a bicycle. Fuck you. Alright, enough of the fun shenanigans. Let's get back to the serious stuff. Let's get to the music. Biggest band to come out of Arkansas. To find this, we're gonna have to travel through time all the way back to the distant year of 2003. Not the most chipper time in American culture. The country was still reeling from the trauma of 9/11. The Columbia Space Shuttle disaster had just happened. And the war in Iraq, while not happening till later in the year, was filling our thoughts with ideas of weapons of mass destruction and anxiety about how safe we really were, and whether the freedom of our own country, as well as the sovereignty of others, were worthy sacrifices to ensure that safety. In other words, it was kind of a bummer. We were scared, we were upset, we were angry, and we were like 12 to 16 years old if you were in my generation. The perfect age to really be digging into these emotions. And the music of the time reflected this, or at least rock music did. Gone were the catchy earworms and snarky irreverency of pop punk. The slacker generation became the damaged generation, the dejected generation. And we were all looking for something just a little more dour. Now, don't get me wrong, that type of music still existed. It didn't just vanish overnight. But the top bands of the time were acts like Staind, Linkin Park, Chevelle, 3 Days Grace, and Trapped. Now, while the angst of the day was mostly dominated by men, I mean, angry complaining is one of our stronger suits, am I right? One of the most prominent and best remembered singles to come out of that year was actually from a woman who took a different approach to the somber side of metal. With a voice like the despondent mourning of a haunting Victorian specter, and lyrics not just dealing with anger and depression, but the vulnerability that comes with that, processing trauma, living with uncertainty, and that hollow feeling that swallows you when you know nothing is okay, but you have to pretend it is. For a wayward generation that had collectively lost its innocence with no assured way forward, it certainly hit home for a lot of us. You could say it stirred something up in us. You might even say, something about it woke us up inside. That woman was Amy Lee, and the band was Evanescence. So put on your fishnet sleeves, wash your best pair of Jinko jeans, and polish up your most skull-laden wallet chain as we take a look at the biggest band to come out of Arkansas Evanescence. Evanescence was founded in 1995 in Little Rock, Arkansas, by the aforementioned Amy Lee and guitarist Ben Moody. Aptly named, because after researching the band for this, he Ben Moody. Moody was a Little Rock native, while Lee moved with her family when she was about 13, after being born in California and bouncing to a few other places before they had finally settled in Arkansas. The two had met at a Christian youth camp just a year before in 1994, and became fast friends, finding two things in common. The first was that neither of them fit in particularly well at this camp. I don't know for sure, but I imagine the whole ordeal would have been something like Adam's Family Values.
Why are you dressed like somebody died? Wait.
The second thing was a passion for music. Amy would play piano while Ben would play acoustic guitar. Naturally, the two thought, by golly, let's make a band. And a band they made. Early potential names for the band included Stricken, Childish Intentions, and a slew of other names that they'd apparently make up on the spot.
We went over a lot of different band name ideas. I mean, we're just playing like coffee shops every 6 months, so.
Okay.
It's kind of like, who are we? Well, I don't know, just make something up.
Yeah, whatever.
Apparently they had kind of stumbled upon the name Evanescence, as when the band was asked where the name came from, they replied, the dictionary. Like literally, they were looking through the dictionary for cool words, and they liked that one. Right on. Checks out. I mean, it's literally a book of words. If you're trying to look for words, we're better to look. Although I guess every book is a book of words. So let's check it out. How does the old Merriam-Webster define evanescence? Evanescence, noun. The process of evanescing. Top notch. Okay, got it. Perfect. What the fuck is evanescing? I've never heard anyone say that. Hey, what's going on over there? You guys evanescing? Yeah, we're evanescing. Give it a shot, man. Come on, don't be a square. Evanesce. Alright, well, let's see. What the fuck does evanesce mean? Evanescing. To dissipate like vapor. That's cool. Lee and Moody liked this idea, feeling that it was representative of the temporal nature of life. As if each of us were a wisp of life, fully formed and present, until nothing's left. On brand. Also, it's just a name that sounds dope as hell, am I right? Now, even in these early stages, Amy knew what kind of music she wanted to make, wanting to meld her classical piano influences with the modern intensity of grunge, metal, and alternative. Those classical influences consisted of composers such as Mozart, Beethoven, and of course, everyone's favorite Gothic composer, Danny Elfman. The concept of grand, sweeping orchestral symphonies existed in her head, but as you can imagine, two teenagers from Little Rock didn't have access to such resources. What they did have was a 16-track tape recorder and some mild experience with Pro Tools, where they can kind of fake some string action using Amy's keyboard. But it was a far cry from what the band wanted and would eventually be capable of. In 1998, of their own volition and talents, and a little help from a small-time local label, Bigwig Enterprises, they cobbled together their first EP, the self-titled Evanescence EP. Shortly followed by the Sound Asleep EP in 99, and what is technically their first full-length album, Origin, in 2000. Really, it was more a series of demos, with a few of the songs even being reworked for what would be their actual debut album, Fallen, but we're not there yet. And that's not me saying that. The band definitely regards it as such, with Amy saying, "It's something I've always cringed about, because ever since we made a real studio album and honed in our sound and became Evanescence and made Fallen, I'm like, okay, everything before this, we were just practicing." It was this demo, however, that would catch the attention of Wind Up Records. After a producer heard their music while the demos were being mastered at Ardent Studios in Memphis, and played them for a friend of his, Diana Meltzer, pictured here with Miss Lee, who at the time was the head of Wind Up's Artist and Repertoire Department, which if you don't know, that's the branch responsible for talent scouting. And talent they did scout. Meltzer quickly fell in love with Amy's voice, somber and vulnerable lyrics, and overall gothic sound, and Wind Up would sign the band in 2001. So the band was created in 95, and then signed to a major label in 2001. That is quick work. Under the wing of their new big label, the band was flown out to Los Angeles with the intention of freeing them from all distractions. You know, surrounding them with their ilk and an artistic culture, helping to get their minds 100% in the creative zone. Which, fair. I mean, if I wanted inspiration to write songs about drowning in misery to the point where I no longer feared death but welcomed it, LA seems like the place. What's worse is the band was under the impression that they were only going to be there for 6 months, but in fact, were stuck there for 2 years, which understandably pissed everyone off. Not that they weren't grateful for the label, and the label provided them with like a place to live and record and practice and all that. It's just you can't sneak things like that up on people without it rubbing them the wrong way. We're going to uproot your entire life and trap you in a place you hate all for the sake of making us money. During this time, Amy was also made to take acting lessons per the studio's request to combat her stage fright. She would recall that you don't really realize how awkward being on a stage in front of hundreds of people makes you feel. I mean, I feel awkward doing this. Anyone out there watching this, have you ever just tried sitting and talking to a camera as if it's a person? It's a weird feeling. I can't even imagine trying to like entertain hundreds, if not thousands of people. So she was taught how to carry herself and build a stage presence. The band spent those 2 years hard at work, crafting their music, shaping their sound, and becoming the band they wanted to be and now finally could be. However, not everyone agreed on the vision. Tensions were high as Lee and Moody began to squabble over creative direction, to the point where most of the songs for the upcoming album were written independently of one another. One would write something, give it to the other, they do something else to add to it, give it back, forth, so on and so forth, like passing notes in class. Moody, as it seems from what I can gather, was way more comfortable playing ball with the record executives, while Amy was much more concerned about artistic integrity and retaining control over her music. You know, it's her art. But despite the speed bumps, the new album was ready. It nearly broke the band apart, but they'd done it. And it was all nearly for nothing. After having most of the new album ready to go, studio executives suddenly decided that they would refuse to release the album unless a full-time male co-vocalist was added to the lineup. So not just a co-vocalist, they needed a rapper. Because, like, you know, Linkin Park was big, and I guess the studio decided they wanted, like, a female version of Linkin Park. After pouring their soul and sanity into this album for 2 years, you could see how it might be tempting to just go with it. Especially when it's so close to finally being released, but amazingly, they didn't. They said no. The studio promptly withdrew their funding, released them from their contract, and Evanescence was back at square one. Defeated, but with their dignity intact, they made their way back to Little Rock. Don't worry though, the thing is, the studio was kind of bluffing. There were already commitments in place that the studio didn't want to lose out on. Primarily, the lead single, Bring Me to Life, being featured on the soundtrack for the upcoming Daredevil movie. A film sure to be a hit. Wouldn't want to miss out on that. The studio would give the band a call just a few weeks after telling them to fuck off, with a compromise. No male co-vocalist, no rapper, except on one song, just the one, just so it sounds familiar to audiences and fits snugly on that Daredevil soundtrack, one little feature on Bring Me to Life, and then everything else can be as you want it. Now, the band still wasn't particularly happy, as being the lead single and the one that most people would hear, they were worried it would cause audiences to think they didn't sound like they actually did, like they would expect more of this on the rest of the album. I think we can all name a time where we heard a song somewhere, loved it, thought the artist was cool, went and bought the album only to find out that the rest of the album sounds nothing like that single. But begrudgingly they conceded, and vocalist Paul McCoy was brought in to sing the accompanying parts, which were still written by Lee. It fascinates me that this part is considered a rap section. Like, it may be slightly rap adjacent, but even that's being generous. Maybe that's part of why it aged so much better than most other songs that came out of the nu metal genre from the time. By the way, the song My Immortal, which would end up being the second single, was also featured on the Daredevil soundtrack, but that song was meant to play during like a sad funeral scene, so it was allowed to be a sad girl song without the studio jumping in to demand they turn it into a cool angry boy song. The deal between Evanescence and Wind Up Records was rewritten, the album release was back on track, and on March 4th, 2003, the world was given Fallen, the official debut album of Evanescence. Upon first being introduced to this band, we as a society collectively had the same thought. Damn, goth chicks are hot. And then we had a second, more constructive thought, and that's that this music fucking rocks. Fallen sold over 140,000 copies in just its first week, debuting at number 7 on the Billboard Top 200, and within 3 months would climb all the way up to its peak at number 3. Cracking the top 10 of the Billboard 200 for a band that, as far as the public was concerned, hadn't existed until this album, that's fantastic. If you've watched my Alabama video, you know how long it can take before a band finally gets their big break. The album topped charts in over 10 countries and would eventually become certified diamond, and today is the 6th best-selling album of the 21st century. So from 2001 to now, all of the music of the last 20 years, and Fallen sits at number 6. Now, to be fair, there's not a lot on that list from the later 2000s and absolutely nothing on it from after 2015. So I'm pretty sure streaming has played a big part in why these early 2000s albums are not getting knocked off the charts. Because, you know, no one's really counting album sales anymore. But still, damn, that's impressive. The band would even find themselves nominated for 5 Grammys that year, taking home 2 of them. 4 singles would come off of Fallen: My Immortal, Going Under, Everybody's Fool, and of course the single that kicked everything off, Bring Me to Life. I feel pretty confident that you've heard this song. If you were from my generation and following popular music at all, it was pretty much unavoidable. For younger generations, it's persisted as somewhat of a meme.
Wake me up inside. I can't wake me up inside. Save me.
Just like this.
And even if you're of the older generation and you haven't paid attention to rock past, like, the 80s, you still have likely bumped into this song at one point or another, even if it wasn't on purpose. I would be really skeptical of anyone who says they haven't. Now, surely the band was riding high, but unfortunately, with so much success so quickly, the tensions within the band only grew. First off, with all this extra attention came a lot of public scrutiny, and the band found themselves battling a very stubborn rumor that they were in fact a Christian band in disguise. This led to some Christians just blindly loving them for that reason and that reason alone, and for some non-Christians to blindly hate them for that reason and that reason alone. Both of those are stupid, but even those in between those extremes still didn't really love this. And why is that? Why is it a problem that they might be a Christian band? If you are a Christian, I'm sure the reason is that there's a war against Christianity, and America is trying to remove Jesus from the country, and all that. You're so persecuted, I'm very sure. But the truth of the matter is simply that people just don't like being tricked.
Can't you see you're not making Christianity better? You're just making rock and roll worse.
Evanescence was sort of an anomaly. Like I said, there wasn't really anything else like them. Sure, there was plenty of music from that time made by people and for people who felt misunderstood, who felt like outsiders. Music for the misfits and the rejects. But Evanescence was making music for people who were like in that group, but still felt like they didn't fit in. A lot of people felt a real connection to what this band was doing. And nobody liked the idea that it was all some veiled attempt at conversion, an act, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Or in lamb's clothing, I guess. However, the thing is, they weren't. The band was not, nor had they ever intended to be, a Christian band. So where did this come from? Well, for one, the band being created by 2 Christian kids at a Christian summer camp didn't help. But the majority of evidence for this rumor actually came from Wind Up Records themselves. While Wind Up Records is not a Christian label, they certainly had it good within the Christian rock market. They were the same label that gave us Creed, which, if not a flat-out Christian rock band, leaned pretty heavily on those themes. Another spiritually charged band that came out of the Wind Up camp was 12 Stones, the lead singer of which was Paul McCoy. Yes, the same Paul McCoy that was the guest vocalist on Bring Me to Life. And Wind Up used these ins to promote Fallen in the Christian rock market, with the album being sold in Christian bookstores and the single being played on Christian radio. All of this, and with lyrics about feeling lost, vulnerable, and wayward, while seeking some grand but vague form of protection or salvation, and it paints a pretty compelling case. Plus, it was a pretty common thing during this time period. Christian rock was morphing into Christian metal, and there were a whole host of bands that skirted the line just well enough that most people would be surprised to find out that they were in fact a Christian rock band. Bands like Skillet, POD, Flyleaf is kind of similar. Honestly, it made a lot of sense to people that Evanescence was just another one of these acts, but nope. And that became very clear with a now infamous quote from Ben Moody while doing an interview for Entertainment Weekly. Moody said, "We're actually high on the Christian charts," and I'm like, what the fuck are we even doing there? He probably didn't say it like that, but that's the best I could read it. Yeah, the fallout from this was pretty much immediate. The Christian hardcore denounced Evanescence. Their album was yanked off the shelves at Christian bookshops. Christian radio stations stopped playing their songs. The word fuck was enough to frighten off an entire demographic. And yet despite this, I still hear people say to this day that they think Evanescence is a Christian band. It was a rumor that they never really got away from. Amy Lee would say, "There are people hell-bent on the idea that we're a Christian band in disguise, that we have some secret message. We have no spiritual affiliation with this music. It's simply about life experience." And honestly, I buy that. It's not the band's fault that Christians think they have a copyright on life experience. Now to be clear here if you're getting annoyed, the band was not against Christian music. They, in fact, are Christian themselves. They just didn't like the idea of their music being pigeonholed like that. Their music was about a lot of things, not just the one thing. Frustrating as this was, it actually wasn't the worst of it. As I said, tensions were rising in the band. Not everyone handles success well, and the relationship between Amy Lee and Ben Moody was straining hard. You can call it creative differences, or you could call it personal drama, but the cold hard truth is, they had just become incompatible over the long years they've worked together. In Moody's own words, "A cruel fact of life is that the person you are at 15 doesn't resemble the person you are at 18 and 21. In October of 2003, only 7 months after the release of Fallen, and literally right in the middle of a tour, Moody left the band. The departure was not amicable. It was ugly and mean-spirited on both sides. The band, with no other options, would find a replacement for Moody to finish out the tour and carry on. From this point on, the band was in Amy's hands. While Fallen remains the band's best-selling album to this day, or, as of recording this, that is not to say that the band lost any momentum. The second album, The Open Door, released in September of 2006 and earned the band its first #1 spot in the Billboard 200. And I know what you're thinking. Well, of course it would debut at #1. The album was still riding off the success of Fallen. Obviously, a lot of people were going to check out the next album just buying it on blind faith. But their third album, the self-titled Evanescence, which didn't release until 2011, 5 full years after The Open Door and 8 years removed from Fallen Fever, still debuted at #1. And the band is still trucking. In 2017, they released the album Synthesis, which is mostly songs we've heard already, but reimagined in a orchestra meets electronica kind of way. I'd highly recommend it. It's super interesting to hear. I almost feel like Synthesis, more than anything, is like pure Evanescence, like the most distilled and appropriate form of Amy Lee on display. And just recently, in 2021, they released The Bitter Truth. And honestly, the whole thing kind of slaps. Side note, Amy Lee even helped to score the 2014 film War Story. Never heard of it till now, but I thought that was kind of cool. I think it's easy for the average person to think of Evanescence as somewhat of a one-hit wonder, but that is selling the influence of this band remarkably short. I don't know if this is related at all, but I did want to mention it, because I remember a few years ago, there was a report from Fender that the majority of new guitar sales, that is somebody buying a guitar for the first time, like just getting into the instrument, were women. I also remember some people remarking on this saying like, oh, it makes sense that you have super popular acts like Taylor Swift, who she's out there with her glittery acoustic guitar, and that inspires, young girls to go and pick up the guitar too. Which, that does make sense to some degree. But in the years since, I haven't really seen much of an uptick in the singer, songwriter, country, pop artist sphere. What I have seen is an absolute tidal wave of female-led rock, indie, punk, and metal. And many of these new acts specifically cite Amy Lee as an inspiration for them. Now, it would be ludicrous to claim that Amy Lee and Evanescence is the sole factor for this. Obviously, this is not a vacuum. There's a lot of things in the world that inspire people to do things. But I do think it's really cool, and I do think that it really cements how important a band like Evanescence is going to end up being in the lore of rock history. To the people who love this band, they love this band, and their influence cannot be overstated. Well, there you have it, folks. As always, if you're wondering where I'm pulling these bands from, I will link to the article. It lists all the states and all the biggest bands that come out of them. That's what I'm using as my reference, so if you're curious, you can go check that out. And while you're down there, why not leave a comment? What do you think of this band? Did you stick with this band past 2003, or do you only know the songs from Fallen? What's your favorite tune from them? Or do you think they suck and I'm overselling it? Go ahead, let me know in the comments below. Also, if you're from Arkansas, please go ahead and list some local bands that you enjoy. Whether it's a band you know, your friend's band, your band, go ahead and comment any local acts that you think deserve a shout out and link me to some of their music so I can check them out. Once the series is over, I would love to circle back and promote my favorite local bands from your suggestions. So please go ahead and do that. If you like this video, please strum the thumb, up picking or down picking, any which way, it's okay. Please subscribe if you'd like to come back. Thank you for coming back. If you're already subscribed, always good to see you. Thank you for coming out, and I'll see you at the next gig.